G'day folks, Schneb back at you here inside the workshop. Got a nice echo going on, that empty feeling. Concrete's in, started insulating up some of the walls, putting up a couple of sheets of drywall here and there. Lots of stuff going on. I built a quick little makeshift workbench. Lumber prices are through the roof still, so that's just old lumber I had laying around. Working on this here Can Am 650. Lots to do. We got the belt off it there. Part showed up the other day, but we're not going to put it on until we're a little farther along here. We still got to tear the suspension off of this thing and replace front CV axles, and both drive axles, front and rear, are gone on this thing. They're just clanking like you wouldn't believe. So we're going to get into doing that today. Okay, so we'll show you what's going on here. The CVs on the back of this thing are in decent shape. Boots are all there. This one's a little twisted, and as always, you got a lot of crap that runs around it when it's on the farm. This fella's got 800 and some acres, so does a lot of driving around the farm in the bush. There's our big deal right there. Okay, so that's your drive axle for the rear end. The actual joints, the universals, are a little sloppy, but that center one is about ready to come apart. Okay, so anytime the boots go on these things, the rubber boots, and they get water in there, they're not long for this world, and that's what's gone on here. That boot split apart, water got in, just removed any grease that happened to be in there, and it just wore right out. Okay, so we're gonna get that changed. Parts are supposed to be here today. Okay, and here's the front. You can see here the boot's gone off the CV joint. Okay, it's almost dry of grease, and there's play in that. This is going as well. Not as bad as the back, but you can see here, if you hold one side and turn the other, you got a good 3/4 of an inch of play there. It's toast. Okay, so between the front and rear, that's a lot of noise. The other CV boot's just like this one, and it's actually more worn out. So again, we got basically an entire drive line to put onto this thing today. All right, we got all our nuts WD'd. Let's see if that cooperates or not. Well, didn't want to, but she went. Okay, so we got two troublesome ones. Need a bigger tool. Leverage this cane. Planned out with a bigger bar. Interesting. Like that. So sometimes these big long bolts, they get oxidized in this aluminum diff housing, and you can see there's quite a bit of oxidization on them. You just got to give them a little bit of love, show them you know you care. Now that don't work, heat them up. Okay. You always pull batteries before you can get a job anyways, just in case. Something I had to fix anyways on this. The ground terminal here is rusty and dirty, and the bike was having starting issues, so pull it out anyway. Well, I know why that bolt don't want to come out. Okay, well, here's why that bolt don't want to come out. The housing is cracked on both sides, and it's just full of water in there. So this just got a lot more complicated. Okay, so these are the other two bolts I need to get out. There's the top two right there. This one's out already. That one's just sitting in there. I need to get these two out. We'll get this off. I think what I'm going to do here because that one in the housing is going to be a nightmare, and I don't want to damage the housing completely. Is this part of the trailer hitch receiver, I can unbolt from here, and maybe I'll just pull the whole receiver out. This part goes through this section here, but this part, it's actually the receiver. So if I take these two bolts, I can leave this big long guy and not mess with that busted case. But I just got to get this guy out, and these two. Getting hot in here. Thing about this part of Canada, winters are nasty cold. You get about 2 weeks of spring, and then it goes right into 30+ degree summers. Love it. Love it! Really, who wouldn't want your bolts all beaten up off of rocks, right? If they weren't, you probably ain't driving hard enough. And that's where the fun begins. Alright, now we just gotta hope I can get that front one to cooperate. And my plan is all gone to hell. Of course not. Like a pain in my butt. When in doubt, heat it up. Generally, aluminum doesn't need a whole heck of a lot of heat because it transfers it so well. Like that. Woo. Nice one. Get in there and hit it. You don't like to cooperate much, this machine. There we go. So other than the fact that they're full of dirt and rust, they're in pretty good shape. Well, you see here, this bolt is supposed to hold a plastic shroud here to protect the boot. It's on this side, but not this side, of course, and I didn't look at the other side. So I got one more little bolt to pull out. Love it when the plan comes together. Okay, so that affords us just enough room to do what I need to do. You see the drive shaft fell off. Yeah, we're in dangerous territory here using heat, because that's your fuel tank. You see somebody rubbed off something on it with the wheel. I'll lubricate anything that I may have to remove later. Well, in the end, it always turns out to be a bigger job than I anticipate. I ended up having to pull the diff right out, pop the axles off and everything. Just so many bolts, it's so rusted in, you couldn't get at them. I can't heat nothing up because the gas tank's right here. So now, I have the diff out sitting on the bench. It'll be a much easier thing to fix now. So, yeah, they don't make them easy on this one. So this is going to be fun. I got to get this bolt out here to pull this slip yoke off. Okay, so there's the process I'm using. I just slapped it in a vise just to break that bolt loose. I'm using a 15 mil. And there she goes. If you're not fortunate enough to be able to rip it out like this, then you got to do this on the machine. In my case, vise does the job since I got mad. Made my life easy. And these little ratchet wrenches here, they're great for doing this kind of thing where you can't get any other tool in. Just put your finger on it. And that's the bolt you're trying to get out. Once that's out, it just pulls out. So if you're looking to change your brake disc, that's how you get that out as well. And of course we're losing gear oil everywhere. Why not? Since when does anything ever work without me having to heat it up, right? Broke the tip right off my Torx. That's hot. I hate Torx.
The next morning.
Alright, as promised, front drive axle, rear drive axle, and both your front CV axles. So we actually can put some stuff back together. These inboard brakes are driving me nuts. Trying to get that brake disc off. That's kicking my butt. Broke 2 Torx already trying to get it. It's with heat, so we're going to really come aboard it now with some major scale heat and see if I can't get them out without breaking any more of my tools. Still using propane to heat things. I got the oxygen and acetylene in the other garage, but I don't want to bring everything out here because, as you can see, I'm still putting up walls and drywall insulation and other things, and anything I put out here just gets in my way. Oh, look at that. Like butter. Amazing what real heat does. Let's see if these are heated up just by... Oh. Get them all. Woo, that's hot. Yay, where's my gloves? Get 2 at a time this time. Blind! Look at that. Most of the problem is right here on the brake disc, where that tapered bolt, it does not want to break loose. Yeah, I don't use this a whole lot anymore. I got downgraded to the smallest bottles I could get, basically. When I was coming up, I had great big ones, but I don't use it so much. You know, back I used to always do body work and any light stuff, you'd braze them in. Oxygen, acetylene, and brazing rods. And so I eventually got to the point where all I ever used this for was heating up bolts like I just did there. And well, propane almost always will do it. And it's a heck of a lot more convenient and cheaper. But it's probably been 3 years since I fired that thing up. Lucky I had it in acetylene, it was almost on empty. But, as you've seen, when you need it, you need it. And those are, you don't get any looser than that now. I broke 2 Torx sockets doing this, and the Torx sockets probably cost more than the amount of acetylene I just used. Oh well, what do you do? Ooh, hot, hot, hot. Yay! Didn't need them fingerprints anyways. We'll just set that down on the ground right here. Hard part done. Shiny and new. Alright, out with the old, in with the new. Putting our brake disc back on. Quick round on the wire wheel. Ground off that outside radius there, because that's where the brake pad doesn't actually touch, so you end up with a little lip on both sides. So you just gently grind that rust. It's basically just rust. Just grind that off and makes it easier to assemble. Wire wheeled up the bolts. Gonna use a little bit of blue thread locker. And one would argue, with how difficult they were to get out, Do you really need tread locker? Well, yes. This is a brake component. And yes, because of the taper, they're designed to not come out on their own. But something's got to hold them in there until they get all rusty and old. I love the power tools for their speed, but in the end, you do have to feel the tightness. You know what you're dealing with. Okay, so the next thing we got to put on is there's this little bushing that goes on the end. Okay, and the reason that's there, I'll show you on the old one, was over time the seal will wear grooves into that. It's cheaper to replace this piece here than this entire section. When it comes to putting these suckers on, perfect. Problem is, if you don't get it on hot enough right away, you put it on, the metal here quickly absorbs the heel and it expands too. I was a little slow getting it on. All right, so on this side, it doesn't get one of those, it gets a little dust shield. And that's going to be the same thing. It's a lot thinner, so you don't need to heat it up. Done like dinner. Okay, we've got our back drive shaft ready to go in here. So, real easy to go in. Slide her in from the back. Line up your splines. And just wiggle her in. Well, it turns out we're running into a small issue here. The new part has a longer collar here than the old part. Now, there is a piece in the output shaft, a little sleeve that comes out, but that sleeve is a smaller diameter than this end. So I cannot get this in there without replacing the back part of the engine, the transmission. So we're going to steal this yoke, put it on that brand new universal joint, put the old yoke back in. That'll solve our problems. Pretty easy fix. And all we want is the yoke. We're not after universal. We got a new universal joint on that one that we're going to reuse. So they'll be just like new, even though this one piece is an old part. Oh, come on. Just got to loosen up one part here. There we go. As the old saying we used to say, if it doesn't go, use a hammer. If it breaks, it needed replacing anyways. Okay, got the yoke cleaned up on the wire wheel. New cap's ready to go on. Okay, all you got to do here is slide it over, get it into position, and push one cap in at a time. Now this thing's a little big for this little guy, but it'll do the job. In case you don't have that tool, I'll show you the way I've always done them in the past. Okay, so we got one cap almost all the way on. Take your other cap, again, line it up, push it in. Now what you want to do is get your universal so it's into both caps and put it in your vise. And this don't take a whole lot of pressure. Okay, once you get to this point, you can see you're almost home. You grab a socket. And that's real easy. You can even go a little farther on the one to start because you want to be able to put this clip in now. Okay, so you want to make sure you can see that groove. Put your finger over it so it don't go flying. Squeeze it and pop it in. Okay, you can see this, it's moving around real good because I pushed that cap in farther than it needed to go initially. Do the same thing on the opposite side, and this time it's going to push up to the clip. Same thing. Lickety split. Okay, one now ready to go with the new yoke in it. Okay, our new old yoke is in with the drive shaft sitting on the splines. Now we get to put our fancy little tiny bolt in, which is this tightest little thing you've ever seen. I don't know why there's even a bolt there. I get it, you want to hold it in place, but the differential's bolted to the frame, the same as the motor's bolted to the frame. There's no movement here, other than casual engine vibration and torquing. So where do they think this drive shaft's gonna go? It can't just fall out. It's kind of bizarre. It'd be one heck of a long time getting this thing in if you didn't have a ratchet wrench. Okay, so there we go. That is in. Now we can start putting our differential back on. Okay, first order of business here before we do this is to cut away all this baling twine and wire, looks like fence wire, which, if you live on a farm, gets into everything. So when you look at your back axles, same as the front, the left one has a longer stub on it than the right one. Okay, diff going back in. There's gonna be some juggling going on here, let me tell you. Same as the other side, short little stubby bolt and heavy washer. Hold that drive shaft in. Tell you what, you want some small fingers for this job. You ever just want to throw a match on something? Good God, it's like 10 minutes trying to get that thing started. I'd love to show you that process, but I could barely get one finger in there to wiggle it, let alone a camera. You gotta love engineers. One side's a tiny little 13, but this side, it's a 50. You know, there's more power at one side than the other apparently. Some days, man, some days. I wanna grab an engineer and shake their head. Okay, so we got our drive shaft hooked up. Now before we go any further, we're gonna lift our axles and put them back in. Because once you bolt that diff in, you won't be able to do it. Okay, so we're just gonna do it like so. Enough for now, we'll knock them in the rest of the way here as we go. And now we're just gonna start slamming bolts back in. Okay. Diff bolted in loosey here along the bottom. We still got all that mess to put up top, the battery tray and whatnot. But for the back brakes, a lot easier than the front because I didn't take them off the pins and worry about the pads and everything else. I was able to easily get access to the mounting bolts itself that bolts to the differential. Okay, so pull them apart, take your bolts out. You can see somebody had some Loctite on those. And all that does is goes on like so. One pad on either side, yes sir, and put your bolts back in. All right. Okay, so that brake is now on. Before you even go any further, so you don't forget, pump up all your brakes, because that'll push the pads up to the disc the way they're supposed to be. If you were to take off the way it is right now and hit your brakes, you're getting nothing until you pump them a couple times. Because you don't want to leave that till the end and forget. Especially if the customer comes to get your machine and takes off and goes to load it in their trailer or something. It goes right through the back window of their pickup. It'll be pretty embarrassing for you. Okay, just tightening stuff up now. I think we're done at the back end of this puppy. Possible? Can it be true, Papa Smurf? Okay, back end of the 2008 Can Am 650 XT high output ABCD EFG is done. We got a little bit more yet to do on this thing, but it's getting there. I can actually feel completeness. Anyways, we will catch us on the next one when the parts show up.